All right, well, my new ECU came in. I wanted to compare and show you how I'm going to install this thing before I do it, and show a little bit of progress as I'm doing it. So this is the old ECU Speeduino board. The Arduino goes on these pin headers on the bottom here. As you can see, I just ran my own wires from the board directly over to this 35 pin connector. And the story behind this is the car's been running poorly, I think because I dropped this on the ground. I checked all the wiring, replaced the crank position sensor, still having problems. So I believe there's something that happened when I dropped this ECU on the concrete floor, and I don't really trust that I'm going to be able to rely on this thing. So rather than trying to go through and fix it, I'll probably try to use it on a future project, but we're just going to set that off to the side for now. The thing that stinks is I did have all of the wires connected to the J-series harness, so I have to redo all that stuff. Here's the new board that I got. It is a Speeduino DetonationEMS X4, which means it's a 4-channel, and this uses the same profile and firmware and everything, and board layout as the 0.4, which is what this is. So this one, I bought the board, soldered everything on it, put it all together myself. This one, you buy all assembled pretty much, except the connectors are not soldered on, so you have to solder these connectors, and then the pins for these little connectors you have to crimp. And these connectors are not my favorite. They can only handle an 18 gauge wire, and that's fine, but smaller than I wanted to use. So these are 18 gauge wires. This is just from a spool of wire I got from the farm store. Just kind of standard vinyl coated wire. Nothing real special there. What I did is crimped all these wires onto the pins that push into these connectors, and then I labeled each one, and you can see the board is labeled as well. The pins on the board are labeled. So what I'm planning to do is, since I cut these all off of the Accord harness that's in the car, I wanted to have a one-to-one ability to connect that in here. So I took my spreadsheet here. These are the pins that I was using on the old connector, and then I just went through and assigned pins based on the pin out of this DetonationEMS unit. Now the nice thing about this being a 0.4 firmware compatible is you can just take the Arduino board off of the other one and stick it on there, and you don't have to make any other changes. As long as you get it wired up the same, should work the same as what I had before, because this board is a 4-channel from it's a 0.4 3C. I got this from WTMtronics. Good place, good stuff. I think if you drop it on the concrete, it's sometimes a problem though. So my hope is that my condemnation of this ECU was correct, and that this will fix my problems. This thing costed me, I think I paid $120 for the board and the connectors and the pins, and then you got to come up with the rest of this stuff yourself. Now I also added this Bluetooth module, which they sell on DetonationEMS, sells on their website. So that just plugs in right here, and then you can you can run it like that. So that way you won't have to actually plug into the connector to do the tuning. Let's see if I can do this. You might have to take my word for this. The old case that I 3D printed will fit this. So all I need to do is slide this in, and then I will cut some new ends or print some new ends for it that match this board. Really, I can just have a flat end on this one, and then the other side can be maybe, I was thinking maybe a piece of this acrylic I would cut. It actually might be nice to have both sides acrylic so that you can look in there and see the LEDs flashing for troubleshooting purposes. So I might do that. We'll see how this all turns out. Now when I took the old ECU out of the car, I marked all of the wires with tape just to show what they are. And really all I need to do is match those up and crimp them on. So it shouldn't be terrible. We'll see how bad it actually is. But everything's marked, so, you know, with the exception of the VTEC wiring, which I was getting 12 volts out of the ECU because I had a relay that I added in there, which was this one here. I'm gonna have to add an external relay. So what I did is I just stole, I think this was the AC clutch relay. I just stole that, and I'll put some shrink tubing on these spade connectors, and that'll just live in the harness kind of along here. And I think that'll work fine. I've done that before. Seems to be fine. So the next video I'll give you an update, hopefully on this thing all installed and ready to go. I did slide heat shrink on there, so once I crimp these on, I can just slide this over and protect all these connections. So hopefully it goes okay. It's probably a couple hours of work. We'll see how quick it goes. Oh, as with most things, this has to get worse before it gets better, right? I have my DetonationEMS harness in here, my signal converter for the TAC, and the speedometer wired in. This is the relay for VTEC. It's the one I was talking about that I stole from the AC clutch. And then the DetonationEMS lives in this case. I decided to put clear ends on it so I can see both the power light and the injector driver light. This could be cut down so it's, 2 inches shorter. I may do that, but not necessary for what I'm doing today. So it's ready to plug in, and I think my next course of action is leave the coils and injectors unplugged and check for sync with the crank sensor. Let's see if that works. Okay, well, this is a good sign that things may be wired up correctly, at least some stuff. I've got a inlet air temp that's reasonable, engine coolant temp that's reasonable, map that's reasonable. Let's see, I have TPS, throttle position. Oh, my cable's not hooked up yet, but I did test that, and I do have throttle position values. So I think with the coils and the injectors unplugged, I should be able to crank this and see if this button right here, this no sync, turns into green and says sync. So let's see if things turn on. All right, that looks good. Wideband is on. I heard the fuel pump cycle. Cross your fingers. Aha! There, did you see this go full sync? And the reason it sounds so goofy is because I have the spark plugs out of it, so there's no compression. And that's a good sign. So that means crank sensor's good. It was probably even trying to fire injectors. Let's see if we can prop this thing up so we can look in here. Maybe this will work, maybe it won't work. Well, maybe I'll just hold you down there and you can see something perhaps. Yep, you can see the lights in there for the injector drivers. Or coil drivers, I'm not sure which those lights are, but in any case, it's gonna try to fire those together. So I think we're doing good here. The next step is to put the number 1 coil on it and a spark plug in the number 1 position, and then verify the timing with the timing light. And the reason I'm doing that is because I modified the crank trigger wheel, and I just want to verify that before I try to move to starting the engine. And I also want to make sure everything's good before I tape all that stuff up. So that looks pretty ugly right now, but I've got all of the unused wires heat shrinked off, and I think I've got everything connected correctly. So, progress. Hey, it's me again. All right, what I'm gonna try to do now is see if I've got spark. So I've got 1 coil plugged in, no spark plugs installed in the engine. And I've got my temporary connection to my starter here. We should see sparks. Okay, I see sparks. Now I should be able to check the timing because I've only got 1 coil in, and I've got my timing light connected to this ground here. So every time a spark happens, there'll be a surge of current through here, which the light will pick up, and then I can point it down in there. I would try to show you, but that's not going to work very well, so I'll have to come back and talk about it. All right, I've got the plugs and the coils back on. I tested each coil. I just took 1 coil and moved it around and made sure the correct output was triggering the correct coil. And now I'm testing the injectors. So the way you do this is you relieve the fuel pressure in the rail, and then you can use this hardware test mode in Tuner Studio, and you can give it a 50% duty cycle. You can hear the only injector I've got on plugged in is clicking, so I know that one's wiring is okay. All right, well, I believe this to be all back together. Let's try to start it, I guess. Prime the fuel pump a couple times. Or several times, as the case may be. Now I think this thing will start. Oh wait, I've got the timing fixed at 0 degrees. That's probably not going to help. Oh, wrong place. Hey, he likes that a little better. Okay, I'll let this thing warm up for a little bit and see if we're going to be good to go here. Maybe? Seems like it's running okay. Well, it's still doing it after all that work. Oh, it's doing a lot. So I guess I need to keep working here. Maybe I will try running a new wire to the crank position sensor. I'm not sure what's going on. To be continued. Alright, so the replacement of the ECU did not do what I thought it would do. So the next episode is going to be me chasing down whatever's causing the issue with the crank position sensor signal dropping out. I did verify with an oscilloscope at the new crimp connection to the new ECU that in fact the crank position sensor signal is dropping out when it dies, like I showed you here earlier. So I need to look at power and ground to the crank position sensor to make sure that's all good and not dropping out because there's a broken wire, loose pin or something. And then I need to, I actually mentioned this idea before, but maybe I'll jumper around basically the whole wire between the ECU and the crank position sensor, and that will at least narrow it down to a section of the harness, and then I can start cutting the harness open and trying to repair that wire, or just running a new wire for it. If it's, you know, it's going to be a pain to do that, we'll have to see how it goes. So to be continued. That's the end of this episode. I'm not going to include all of that in this episode. It's probably long enough, so I'll see you when I see you.